I need to get a real job. If you make a living on YouTube, you've probably seen that line 1,000 times. I've read it so often, it's become like white noise, a kind of background hum from people who still think that work only counts if it involves a boss, a payslip, and the slow erosion of your will to live under fluorescent lighting. But what exactly is a real job? Is it sitting in traffic for 2 hours to reach an office you can't afford to heat? Is it paying for rent on a shop that makes less money than a claw machine full of knockoff plushies? Or is it simply doing something traditional looking enough to make your grandmother nod approvingly over her cup of Tetley? Whatever it is, one thing's certain: online content creation doesn't fit the old school template, and that seems to not only make some people deeply uncomfortable, but also indignant enough to lash out at anyone who manages to survive this way. I feel I am deeply fortunate to be part of a generation that doesn't clock in, doesn't need permission to take a day off, and can reach more people from a spare room than a TV network could with a 7-figure budget 20 years ago. Across the internet, we have audiences, real, paying audiences who tune in because they actually want to hear what we have to say, yet somehow the idea that this isn't real work refuses to die. So in this video, I want to unpack why such a belief somehow still lingers, where it comes from, what it says about the modern idea of work, and why the phrase "get a real job" usually tells you far more about the person saying it than about the person they're attempting to insult. I am Lady Decade, and if you've ever had a boss, or been your own boss, or heroically avoided employment altogether, or you just quite fancy having me be your boss, then please hit that subscribe button, because this is why they want us to get real jobs. On the subject of real jobs, if you happen to be between opportunities and have all the time in the world to game, or you've just clocked out of another exhausting shift over at the Sadness Factory, then I've got you covered. Use my links to get 38% off Silent Hill F, 29% off Black Myth Wukong, 24% off Final Fantasy Tactics The Evilise Chronicles, and up to 90% off pretty much any game that you can think of. So whether you're living off of caffeine and dreams or just need to unwind without remortgaging the house, check out the links below and treat yourself, grab some bargains, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. For a group of people supposedly unemployed, content creators seem to be holding up a rather surprising chunk of the global economy. The creator industry was worth around $104 billion in 2022 and is on track to hit $480 billion by 2027, which, for something your uncle insists isn't a real job, makes it one of the fastest growing industries on the planet. Not bad for a bunch of people who allegedly just sit around all day talking to cameras, is it? YouTube sits right at the epicenter of this so-called unemployment epidemic. In 2024, the platform added around £2.2 billion to the UK economy and supported roughly 45,000 jobs, meaning YouTubers are technically employing more people than some high street chains that have been around since the Tudors. In fact, when YouTube launched its partner program back in 2007, it didn't just give people the chance to make videos, it completely rewired how creative labour was valued. The 55-45 ad revenue split meant that creators got the biggest slice of the pie, a shockingly fair idea in an industry that usually hands the crumbs to the talent and the cake to the middlemen. That wasn't even the end though. Later, YouTube memberships and super chats pushed that share to 70%, giving creators the kind of financial independence that would make most traditional media execs break out in hives. This has helped mean that between 2021 and 2023 alone, YouTube paid out over $70 billion to creators, artists, and media companies. Which I must say is quite a lot of pocket money for people who don't have real jobs. And yet somehow the myth persists: YouTube isn't stable. Right. You've all heard that phrase a million times, including probably from me over the years, but here's the cold hard truth. My concerns are not exclusive to working in online content creation. In fact, around 34% of employees in real jobs fear they'll lose theirs within a year, and the average tenure has dropped to 3.9 years, the lowest since 2002. Statistically speaking, being your own boss is statistically a safer option than working for others. To support this, one study shows that 65% of self-employed workers say they feel more secure than salaried ones, mainly because their livelihoods aren't dangling from the mood swings of a middle manager named Gary. As Dr. Sarah Damask of Penn State University put it, traditional employment has become so risky that content creation looks less risky by comparison. Which is both hilarious and depressing, depending on how many team-building emails you've survived. The logic is simple. Independence spreads the risk, while employment hoards it all in one fragile little basket marked, "Hope the company doesn't downsize this quarter." Creators, for all their chaos, operate more like investors than employees. We diversify, we juggle sponsors, ads, merch, memberships, freelance gigs, all while trying to remember what sleep used to feel like. It's not glamorous in real life, but it's stable in its own unpredictable way. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, self-employed people earn roughly 70% more by the age of 55 than those on fixed salaries. Why? Because we can scale, we can grow. We don't have to wait for a line manager to review our performance before deciding whether we're worthy of a £200 annual raise and a Tesco meal deal voucher at Christmas. Meanwhile, these so-called real jobs, the gold standard of respectability, are built entirely on dependency. One redundancy letter, one merger, one restructuring to improve efficiency, and poof, your entire income disappears overnight. Sure, a creator might have the odd rough month. My August this year was absolutely bloody dreadful, for example, but rarely a total collapse because our livelihoods aren't balanced on one corporate tightrope. They're spread across multiple revenue streams like a sensible adult playing financial Tetris. And speaking of constant diversification, I've just signed up to Rumble, where, believe it or not, my views over there are already topping my views on YouTube. So while some people are still waiting for their boss to approve their annual leave, I'm out here expanding into entirely new platforms. That's the beauty of independence. If one algorithm throws a tantrum, there's always another one to pick up the slack. To give all that up for the illusion of job security is, financially speaking, like selling your investment portfolio to buy one single stock, a move that feels safe right up until the market reminds you that it doesn't care about your feelings. So, despite all of the evidence that content creation is a legitimate, expanding industry, the phrase, "go get a real job," still crops up under almost every creator's video. It's like digital mould that, no matter how many times you scrub it away, it just grows back in the same damp corner of the internet. No matter what the facts say, the truth is that hostility towards creators has very little to do with economics or the job market and everything to do with psychology. It's not about employment, it's about projection and the sheer weirdness that festers in the darker corners of the human psyche. And to understand it, we've got to shine a little light into those shadows. Though, fair warning, it's not pretty in there. As you have probably noticed, many people just enjoy watching others fail. It's not subtle, it's science, and the Germans, of course, even gave it a name, Schadenfreude, which roughly translates to, haha, you slipped on a banana peel and now I feel better about my own pathetic existence. Studies on the so-called dark tetrad of personality traits, so sadism, narcissism, Machiavellianism and psychopathy, show a strong connection between those traits and trolling behaviour. Basically, the internet's worst people are exactly who you think they are. A 2023 meta-analysis found a 0.52 correlation between sadism and online trolling, confirming what every YouTuber has suspected since 2007. The biggest bullies in the comments are doing it just for fun. Let's be honest, internet trolls don't just enjoy upsetting people, it's the only thing giving their lives any structure. Some folks start the day with a coffee and a jog. These ones start it by angrily typing under a stranger's video before their mum yells that dinner's ready. It's not a hobby, it's a full-time cry for help, performed entirely in dressing gowns that smell like wet dogs, urine and disappointment. These are the people who were bullied in real life and decided that the best way to heal was to become bullies online, except without any of the charisma, confidence or actual power that the real bullies had. Their only sense of control comes from picking fights they can't win and mistaking attention for respect. In the real world, they'd get ignored at the pub. They like to think that they're defying the system, but really they're just emotionally underdeveloped bystanders heckling from the cheap seats. But while this explains the origin story of a large chunk of trolls out there, there are other, how shall we say, fascinating subspecies crawling around out there. The fact is that not all hostility comes from sadists hiding behind anonymous avatars. Some of it comes from perfectly ordinary people having a bad day and deciding to share that energy with the rest of the internet, like emotional pigeons leaving little gifts on your car. A Stanford Cornell study called Anyone Can Become a Troll found that when participants were in a negative mood and exposed to miserable discussion threads, the rate of trolling shot up to 68%. In other words, 2/3 of people can go from mildly annoyed to full-time keyboard goblin in the space of a few comments. This implies that context and mood, not character alone, drive a huge amount of online aggression. This troll contagion also explains why hostility spikes during cultural or economic downturns. When people feel powerless, they lash out at anyone who seems to even have a whiff of independence or joy. It's not that they hate creators, they just can't stand the sight of someone doing what they wish they could. So instead of therapy or a hobby, they opt for the free alternative, projecting bitterness onto strangers. They'll type essays in the comments about how YouTubers need real jobs, then immediately go back to scrolling through job listings they'll never apply for. It's less activism and more collective tantrum, a national sport for the chronically unfulfilled. Of course, another piece of the puzzle is malicious envy, that simmering resentment reserved for anyone who seems to have done well without visibly suffering for it. It's not the kind of envy that motivates self-improvement, it's the kind that makes people quietly hope your Wi-Fi drops mid-upload. Many viewers see creators as their peers, ordinary people who somehow cheated the system. They look at YouTubers and think, hang on, why are they earning money talking about video games while I'm trapped in an open plan office praying the printer doesn't jam again? To them, it doesn't look like hard work or consistency, it looks like luck, or worse, audacity. How dare someone turn a hobby into a career without permission from HR? Economist Adam Davidson calls this the modern crisis of fairness, a world where people measure worth through comparison instead of accomplishment. David Markovitz describes it as the hallmark of a frustrated middle class stuck between aspiration and disappointment, endlessly scrolling through lives that seem better than theirs. And of course, social media only pours petrol on that bonfire. Everyone's highlight reel is available 24/7, filtered, edited and cropped to perfection. As one researcher put it, you compare your everyday life to someone else's highlight reel, which is tragic really, because that means someone's looking at my YouTube thumbnail and thinking that represents reality. They see a creator in good lighting and a half-decent backdrop and assume success comes easy, when in truth, we're often filming at 2 a.m, wearing pyjama bottoms and surrounded by cold tea and cables. The sad part is that this malicious envy doesn't just make people bitter, it makes them delusional. They can't comprehend that success requires actual work, so they rewrite reality to soothe themselves. She must have got lucky. He's probably backed by a corporation. It's all algorithms anyway. Anything to avoid confronting the uncomfortable truth that effort and persistence might matter more than complaining about creators online. Put together, schadenfreude, situational trolling and malicious envy form the unholy trinity behind every "get a real job" comment. It's rarely about labour, economics or value, it's about emotion. The phrase itself isn't an argument, it's a reflex, like a dog barking at a postman. It's the verbal equivalent of, "I don't understand your life choices, so they must be wrong." For many, dismissing creators as not real workers is easier than admitting what really bothers them, that freedom exists and they didn't take it. Because if independence is possible, then so is regret, and regret stings a lot more than watching someone on YouTube earn money talking about Sonic the Hedgehog. So instead, they lash out, convincing themselves they're the grounded ones while typing essays about real work from the break room of a job they despise. So looking at it through that lens, it's not outrage at creators, it's self-defense against the realization that maybe, just maybe, the world doesn't reward suffering as much as their boss might have them believe. And that's what truly keeps them up at night. Few communities reveal the psychology behind "get a real job" quite like the retro gaming scene. It's a world I know intimately. I've been knee-deep in cartridge dust, to excuse the pun, for decades now, hey! And if you want even more of that sort of thing, I've just launched a brand new channel, Lady Arcade. Over there I take deep dives into classic hardware every week, the most recent episodes being all about the gloriously disastrous Atari Jaguar. I've been covering a different console every week and it's already snowballing. I'm well on track to hit 10,000 subscribers soon, so if you're into retro gaming, history and the occasional snarky jab at hardware that deserved better, you'll fit right in. I look forward to seeing you over there in the comments.
Where did you learn to fly?
On the surface, retro gaming is built on nostalgia, preservation and a shared passion, but scratch that cartridge label a little and you'll find a surprising amount of resentment lurking underneath the dust cover. I've seen it firsthand. For example, every time a YouTuber gets invited to a convention, a small but disproportionately loud group starts frothing like someone just announced NFTs are coming to the Mega Drive. When I appeared on panels at Play Expo, there was a backlash about YouTubers invading events that used to be for the fans, which is ironic because, newsflash, most of us are fans. We just happen to be the ones who learned how to turn our enthusiasm into something productive instead of keeping it bottled up next to a box of unlabelled pirate Commodore 64 cassettes in the loft. For some, though, the idea of monetising nostalgia seems to cross an invisible moral line, as if talking about old games for a living somehow desecrates the sacred temple of retro culture. This kind of moral outrage always comes dressed up as purity, but let's be honest, it's usually just bitterness in a clever disguise. They'll rant about creators commercialising or distorting the hobby, when what they really mean is, I wish I'd thought of it first. Because when someone else manages to turn the thing you love into a livelihood, it forces that uncomfortable late night question. Why didn't I? You could give some of these purists everything they claim to want and they'd still find something to moan about. They treat YouTubers like corporate villains exploiting the working class, when in reality, most of us are just rioting in our bedrooms at midnight eating cold toast and praying our computers don't crash before we hit save, which, to be fair, probably doesn't help our case. From the outside, what we do looks volatile, unpredictable, inconsistent, a gamble at best, but that's exactly what makes it real work. None of this comes with guarantees, only graft, creativity and the constant pressure to prove we're worth the click. Compounding the irony further, in the last couple of years, major studios like Volition, Arcane Austin and even support teams at Naughty Dog have been gutted by mass layoffs. Thousands of developers have lost their supposed real jobs, not because they lacked talent, but because the modern games industry has the structural integrity of a damp paper bag. Meanwhile, the independent creators, we're all still here, still paying our bills, still showing up every week to talk about 30-year-old games, while the corporations that once defined the medium collapse under their own weight. Retro gaming content creation, through that lens, is a perfect microcosm of the modern labour shift. On the surface, it's about passion and preservation. Underneath, it's about ownership, autonomy and survival. The anger directed at creators isn't really about money or selling out. It's about watching the old hierarchy crumble and realising the so-called amateurs are now the ones with job security. What looks like moral outrage is, more often than not, economic insecurity in disguise. People aren't furious because creators are ruining gaming. They're furious because we proved you can make a living without asking anyone's permission first. While some corners of the retro community still resent YouTubers for becoming public figures, the wider gaming world has already gone the other way. Some developers who were once mysterious names buried somewhere between QA tester and special thanks to mum are now full-blown social media personalities. Audiences expect to know them not just through the games they make, but through their tweets, their selfies and their questionable hot takes at 2 a.m. Figures like Hideo Kojima, Hideki Kamiya and Katsuhiro Harada smashed that wall to bits. Kojima's cinematic flair turned his name into a global brand. He could probably announce a new game called Standing Simulator and people would pre-order the collector's edition. Kamiya, best known for Bayonetta and Beautiful Joe, built a cult following by being both hilarious and terrifying online, blocking people so efficiently that he turned it into a performance art. And Harada, the face of Tekken, has somehow mastered the art of being both professional and completely unhinged on social media to the point where he's now as recognisable as half the fighters in his own game. Even smaller names have followed suit. Jet Set Radio's Hideki Naganuma reinvented himself as the funky uncle, dropping chaotic memes and half-serious political rants between beats. It's a far cry from the old days when developers were expected to stay silent, faceless and obedient. Now personality is the product. The audience rewards charisma, humour and humanity, all the same traits YouTubers have been leveraging for years. But of course, not everyone's managed to adapt to this new world. Few examples illustrate this more painfully than American McGee, the creative mind behind the amazing Alice games. He would tweet out that, "I still wish someone could explain this to me. Why is it that an account with 5 to 6k followers can get 10k likes on a post about my game, while when I post about it, I am lucky to get 300 likes, and I have 50k plus followers? Are all of my followers dead?" This same thing happened during the entire time we were trying to drum up public support for Alice Asylum. All that art, design and other effort was essentially lost to the void. Why it frustrates me. In terms of the sort of response a publisher would want to see as a measure of the IP's potential, there was practically nothing. But to this day, when a random X/Insta account posts up a video montage, it blows the doors off. What gives? PS, no shade towards those who pull these kinds of numbers. More power to you, but I do wish some of that power could have been shown in response to the efforts we made trying to get a third game made. American McGee's tweet perfectly encapsulates everything about this modern creative divide, the point where old notions of prestige crash headlong into the realities of the attention economy. His frustration is genuine, but it also highlights how drastically the rules have changed. He can't understand why an account with a few thousand followers can get tens of thousands of likes talking about his game, while his own posts barely move the needle. To him, it feels like an injustice, but it's just how the system works. The answer to his question lies in what social media actually rewards. Connection, not credentials. McGee comes from an era where talent, experience and an impressive CV were the currency of success, but online those things don't carry much weight anymore. Smaller accounts thrive because they sound like real people, conversational, relatable, enthusiastic. The algorithm doesn't care who you are, it only cares about how much people interact with you. McGee's posts look official and professional, while fan montages feel human, spontaneous and are made out of love. Audiences gravitate towards that authenticity every time. It's not that people don't care about Alice Asylum, it's that they don't see it. Over time, dormant followers stop interacting and the algorithm buries the account. It's a cruel irony that the creator of a cult classic can shout into the void while a fan with a smartphone goes viral for echoing the same sentiment. And that's what makes his post so poignant and unintentionally revealing. He spent his career inside the old hierarchy where developers were faceless craftsmen serving a publisher's vision. Now the creative economy has flipped. Personality, not pedigree, drives success. Fans expect accessibility, warmth, humour, qualities that YouTubers, streamers and indie creators have mastered out of necessity. McGee, meanwhile, is still speaking the old professional dialect in a world that now prefers memes and direct eye contact. Not ideal for the old school computer nerd. McGee's experience also exposes the myth of real job stability. Despite decades in the industry, McGee ended up with no ownership of his work and no platform that would reward his efforts with reach. The supposedly safe corporate route left him powerless, while the so-called fake job brigade has built empires of autonomy out of thin air. He's essentially a talented man playing by rules that no longer exist, wondering why the scoreboard changed. The reality is simple. The definition of a real job has evolved, and the power no longer lies with titles or publishers, it lies with people who can connect, communicate and keep their audience engaged. McGee's tragedy isn't that the audience doesn't care, it's that he's still trying to speak through a megaphone while the rest of the world is having a conversation. We are all now fortunate enough to live in a modern creative world that doesn't necessarily reward silence or subservience anymore. It rewards connection, people who make audiences that care not just about what they create, but who they are. In that sense, developers and YouTubers aren't rivals, they're part of the same evolution, a new creative class where personality, skill and risk-taking matter more than corporate loyalty or keeping quiet. The gatekeepers are gone, the stage is open, and anyone anyone with talent, nerve, and a halfway decent microphone can make their mark. That's not the death of real work, it's the rebirth of it. For all the talk about YouTubers needing real jobs, very few critics have the faintest clue what the job actually involves. They picture someone sitting in front of a camera chatting nonsense for 10 minutes. In reality, a professional creator runs an entire digital production pipeline that, in traditional media, would require an office full of caffeine-addicted interns, a marketing department, and at least one man named Gavin who only ever talks in jargon. Content creation demands expertise in digital marketing and SEO because it's not enough to make a video. You have to make sure that people can find it. A strategist once said, if you can master Google SEO, you're already ahead when optimizing for YouTube. Translation: if you can figure out how to outwit an algorithm that changes its mind more often than a toddler choosing cereal, you're basically a magician. Creators study analytics like day traders on Red Bull, spotting trends, adapting titles, and rewriting thumbnails at 3 a.m. because the curve dipped by 0.2%. Then there's video production and editing, where creators act as directors, writers, cinematographers, editors, and unpaid therapists to themselves. The average video editor earns about $65,000 per year, but most creators perform that job daily, usually while eating crisps for dinner and begging Adobe Premiere not to crash. With over 90% of businesses now relying on video for marketing, these are among the most valuable skills in the modern economy. Most of us learned them not in classrooms, but in the desperate panic of getting a video out before the algorithm forgets we exist. Beyond the technical chaos lies project management. Successful channels run like small businesses, just without the luxury of HR or sick pay. We can plan release schedules, meet sponsorship deadlines, coordinate collaborations, manage budgets, and still somehow find time to panic about the thumbnail font. Every single detail, from the logo on a mug to the shade of red in a title card, is part of a meticulously maintained personal brand. It's marketing, psychology, and mild insanity rolled into one. And then there's the data, endless dashboards filled with click-through rates, retention graphs, and audience demographics. It's like running a stock exchange powered entirely by anxiety. Creators learn to read those numbers like tarot cards, interpreting every dip and spike as a message from the content gods about our future relevance. Put it all together, and content creation isn't a lazy pastime, it's a Frankenstein's monster of creativity, technical expertise, business acumen, and masochism. Even academia has finally caught up. Courses on digital media management, influencer strategy, and content analytics are now offered by major institutions, confirming what creators already knew. This isn't a fad, it's an industry. In short, the skills behind content creator success aren't lucky accidents. They're the same competencies driving modern business, learned independently, tested publicly, and refined through sheer stubbornness. To put it another way, if this isn't real work, then neither is anything else. For all its perks, content creation comes with a price tag that most outsiders never see. Surveys show that around 80% of creators experience burnout, and roughly 2/3 report mental health issues directly tied to their work. So, while the internet imagines us lounging in silk pajamas, sipping coffee, and occasionally uploading something between spa treatments, the reality is a little more gritty. You have to remember, creators don't get sick pay, holiday leave, or HR departments to cry to. There's no redundancy package when things go wrong, and the only occupational health support is a mildly passive-aggressive comment reminding you to go touch grass. Algorithms reward consistency above all else, meaning if you dare to take a week off, you're effectively committing career sudoku. One missed upload and your stats nosedive faster than Konami's reputation after Metal Gear Survive. In truth, small and mid-sized creators have far more in common with self-employed tradesmen than entertainers. The logic is the same: if you don't work, you don't eat. A plumber with his own van faces identical pressures. When he takes time off, the income stops. Yet no one tells a plumber to go get a real job. We instinctively call that entrepreneurship, but when a YouTuber does the same thing, it's wasting time on the internet. Running a channel isn't a lifestyle. It's a business, complete with planning, risk, and the emotional stability of a roller coaster. The product just happens to be creativity instead of manual labour. Like any small enterprise, it's governed by market forces, competition, and fluctuating demand. Long hours, volatility, and public scrutiny aren't indulgences, they're unavoidable hazards of digital self-employment. One of the most common retorts to defending content creation is that real jobs are the ones that serve society. Teachers, nurses, doctors and engineers, and fair enough, those roles are absolutely vital, but using them as the sole benchmark for legitimacy is like saying that the only real food groups are bread and water. Society isn't built purely on medicine and education, it's built on communication, creativity and the sharing of knowledge. After all, someone has to make the world worth living in between the hospital visits and tax returns. In fact, online content creation and education are not mutually exclusive to each other. Surveys show that 88% of lecturers and 94% of students use YouTube as part of their study routines, and students who combine video learning with traditional materials see an average 9% improvement in exam performance. So yes, the platform that is often mocked as unserious has quietly become one of the world's largest teaching tools. It is common now that professors are also YouTubers, pulling in more views than mainstream media outlets. Educational creators, historians, linguists and scientists reach audiences that formal institutions could only dream of. Somewhere out there, a teenager is learning physics from a guy in his bedroom and understanding it better than they ever did in school. And this goes way beyond teaching. YouTube has become a living museum for gaming culture. Independent creators document, analyse and preserve titles that would otherwise fade into obscurity. They record prototype footage, scan cartridges and interview developers that publishers have long forgotten. Seen this way, content creation doesn't compete with the so-called noble professions, it complements them. It spreads knowledge, preserves art and makes expertise accessible to anyone with Wi-Fi. It may not have the institutional prestige of a stethoscope or a blackboard, but it serves the same purpose, using skill and effort to create value for others. Philosophers have been saying as much for centuries. Thomas Carlyle wrote that labour is life, and Michael Sandel argued that dignity comes from the act of work itself, not its credentials. Whether you heal, teach, build or create, the worth lies in the result, not the job title. So yes, maybe YouTubers aren't saving lives, but we are saving culture. We're preserving stories, teaching lessons and keeping history alive, all while being told to go and get a real job. If that's not irony, I don't know what is. The idea of a real job to many has quickly become a relic of the past. The gig economy, now worth over $1.3 trillion globally, has turned millions of people into their own bosses, whether they wanted to be or not. By 2024, around 27 million people were working full-time as self-employed professionals, with roughly 1 in 5 earning over $100,000 per year. What used to be dismissed as dodgy freelancing has quietly become the dream, mainly because nobody wants to sit through another Zoom meeting about synergy. This shift reaches far beyond the creative industries. Across every sector, automation, artificial intelligence and remote work are redrawing the boundaries of employment faster than HR can update its spreadsheets. Entire professions that once promised stability are now being replaced by chatbots that can work 24 hours a day and never ask for a pay rise. Meanwhile, digital independence has become normalised. Managing clients, diversifying income and building personal brands are no longer acts of rebellion, they're survival tactics. Everyone's freelancing now, whether they call it that or not. Content creators are just the most visible example of that shift. We are the canaries in the economic coal mine, the first to figure out how to monetize independence, turning hobbies into micro businesses long before remote work became a LinkedIn buzzword. Far from avoiding real work, creators got there first. We're doing what real work looks like now: decentralised, self-directed and held together with caffeine, analytics and a mild panic attack. So after all this, the question remains, why do we still feel the need to define what a real job is? The phrase lingers not because it means anything, but because it's a cultural hangover from an older world, one where work was judged by visibility, hierarchy, and how miserable you looked doing it. Back then, the only measure of success was how many meetings you could survive before retirement. But the truth is, those boundaries between real and unreal work don't exist anymore. The economic reality: the creator industry contributes billions to global economies and supports tens of thousands of livelihoods. The psychological reality: most hostility towards creators stems from envy and projection, that deep discomfort some people feel when they see others earning a living without asking permission first. The professional reality: the skills that keep a channel alive mirror those in marketing, production, and analytics. Except creators do it all alone, usually while eating biscuits over their keyboard. And the cultural reality: creators now educate, preserve, and document history in ways that once required entire institutions and a dress code. These aren't hobbies or passing fads, they're the natural evolution of work in a digital world, self-directed, self-sustaining, and deeply connected to the audiences we serve. So maybe the real question isn't whether content creation counts as a real job, but why anyone still needs the label at all. The world of work has already moved on, and those of us creating within it have simply moved first. Don't forget that using my links, you can get 38% off of Silent Hill F, 29% off Black Myth Wukong, 24% off Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles, and up to 90% off of pretty much any game that you can think of. So whether you're living off of caffeine and dreams or just need to unwind without remortgaging the bloody house, check out the links below and treat yourself. Or if you think today's video added a little value to your life, access my behind the scenes cosplay library and more by becoming a backer over on Patreon. I'll see you all again soon.